What's up, y'all? It's another episode of Throwing Light. It is Sunday, February 9th. I'm LTJ Reeves. This is Throwing Light. And if you're not throwing light, you're not acting right. I got it right so far. I didn't get it right the last couple episodes, but now I know what show I'm on. All right, tonight I'm super excited. I have another one of my IMO brothers on in our 2024 IMO 46 class. One of our podium representatives here, our bronze boy, is here tonight. David Mosqueda.
That's me.
Right. Hello, David. I'm glad to have you here. Before we, get started, I know that we did not really get that much time together during IML. So this is going to be kind of this is our first real time actually having a conversation, to be honest. So I'm excited. So, but, we'll talk more about like why it's sometimes difficult to bond with 59 other people in one weekend, but we'll get to that. Well, welcome, David. Thank you. Please tell everyone how you got involved in the community.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is David Mosqueda. I was Mr. Cachondo 2024. I'm currently Mr. Los Angeles Leather 2024. And like Lewis said, I'm the bronze boy of IML. So I came in third place, second runner up, and was on the podium. Oh, my partner joined. Hi.
I'm gonna turn his camera off. Okay, there we
Yeah.
go.
I don't. What was I saying? So I missed Los Angeles Leather. I'm the bronze boy. How did I get involved in leather? It goes back quite a bit. I remember watching Cruising at 3 a.m. one night and like hiding it from my family because it was on like Showtime or something, and I was like turning it off when I thought I heard them coming out of their bedroom or I heard someone walking up. So I remember watching it like in pieces. Um, and all I just knew that I wanted to be within that community. And then eventually I found my way into a bar and I saw my first leather title. I saw Pup Yoshi win Mr. Long Beach, Mr. Eagle 562, 2017. And I just fell in love with the title system. And then what would that be? 7 years later, I ran the gambit.
And you did well, I see.
That's what everyone says.
Okay, so before we go further, I have to go back to the cruising thing. I mean, most most people have their stories in terms of how they get involved in things. And if you've never seen Cruising before, it's a film with Al Pacino that was made in the 80s in which he's an undercover detective that goes into the leather community essentially, or what was portrayed as the leather community in the early 80s. And there's a serial killer, and the killer is killing people in this community. And because it's this community, there's like this reluctance to kind of help and stuff like that. Which I go watch Cruising if you like horror movies. What I find that fascinating is that that made you want to join the community because that's a dark movie, and it's like and people are going on, but that is a portrayal. And what people don't understand is that back then in the 80s, like being us was like considered to be contagious. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? And so, definitely when you had, the AIDS epidemic and all that, and the things that were systematically placed as stereotype on certain communities like ours, people saw that as like this really darkness that would take over you and horror and things like that. But anyways, enough
Yeah.
of that. Back to you, David. But
Well, a fun fact even on top of that, if you go watch The Exorcist, the guy that does the medical examinations is the person that the book is based off of. He was an actual
is
serial
it
killer.
William Frederick or something?
William Friedkin did The Exorcist, and then William Friedkin did Cruising as well. So there's actually a multi-layered tie between Cruising and The Exorcist and William Friedkin. So
Oh,
the guy who does the initial medical examinations on the little girl in The Exorcist was an actual serial killer. And he confessed to having killed gay men in New York, and it was the crime spree that led to the inspiration to what is his name, Gerald? What's his last name? I don't remember. Who wrote Cruising, which ended up being the film. So
wow, I know that, and that's very interesting.
yeah, that's my
So,
little bit of film history there.
well, we were able to, contribute something to this conversation, so people know we know a little bit about cruising. Go watch cruising. So David, the IML. We'll get kind of into IML a little bit. I do want to get into the things that you've been doing, but kind of go ahead and get to it. We were in the International Mr. Leather contest together. I remember having one or two interactions with you. To be honest with you, what contestant number were you?
I was 16. I had to look over at
Okay,
my.
so you were in group two. You had to look. You had to. I remember mine. Hard
Our good old
to
number
forget.
one over there.
It's number one. Um, but the experience overall, we went through this experience. I know I've had several of our siblings on this show at this point. You've gotten to take the bronze medal home and do things in the community with it. What's it been like being the bronze winner and coming back with with that experience? How's it affected you as a leader and what's been your focus since the win?
Um, I get invited to a lot of things, which is really nice. I wasn't invited to too much before. Yeah, I guess more broadly. I was very, very hyper localized to Los Angeles. But now that I have this medal, I've had the opportunity to go to Mexico City. I had done it before, but this time they wanted me there as a person to discuss my experiences at IML. So that was really nice. I'm gonna go down to Texas in a couple weeks. I'm going down to the Rio Grande Valley, in Brownsville for Mr. RGV. So I'm really excited for that. And I've got to travel most of the country now, which is really nice. However, it hasn't necessarily been leather folks that have been inviting me. Mexico Leather and RGV Leather have, but a lot of my work is mostly done in the field of HIV prevention, STI prevention for Latino folks or Latinx folks. And my experiences in leather really have intrigued people because leather or hypersex positive spaces, really hyper kinky spaces, tend to be left out in conversations revolving HIV prevention. So a lot of folks are really excited to see me in these spaces.
And that's really awesome. And so let's go back into so specifically in the Latino community, what statistically black females tend to, I think, be racial. I don't know. So and with the Latino community, how is HIV viewed? How is it discussed?
So I mean, there's a lot of stigma around HIV in general, but in Latin cultures or even most marginalized cultures, POC cultures, there's more of a hush tone when it comes to medical things. So HIV tends to be pushed aside, especially queer topics. When we look at Latina culture, we see a lot of religion, a lot of hyperconservatism, specifically brought on through religion. So HIV is kind of pushed to the back, and because of that. We now see that in the United States, for the first time in HIV's history, Latinos make up the largest population of newly diagnosed folks with HIV. So it used to be that Black MSM, men who have sex with men, or queer individuals, tended to have a higher rate of HIV in the United States. But as of just this last year, the statistic has flipped. We are seeing a decline in folks that are testing positive for that have a Black identity, but that has not been the case for Latino folks. So we see things that are working across the board aren't necessarily working for Latinos. So we're doing a lot of work and trying to figure out why that is.
So, is there still ignorance that you're dealing with among the community? Because a lot of people, I think, are still not getting tested, and still not wanting to find out, or assuming if they only do certain things they're not going to. Even if you don't have HIV, you should at least be aware and educated to where you're not putting yourself in situations, because I think that some people think that they can get away with doing certain sexual acts and they'll never get exposed, and you never know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I what question? Sorry, I missed the beginning of that. What you?
I was commenting
Oh,
was
okay. No, you're good. Yeah, so I would say there is a part that we have to do as folks that are HIV negative, or folks that are HIV negative have a part in how they go about talking about HIV, discussing HIV. A lot of work does fall into folks that are HIV positive. That's true. I would also add that it's getting tested may not the branding of like go get tested may not always be the messaging that works for everyone. Specifically here in Los Angeles, right? Like I can only really talk about like what I know. But here in LA, most people get diagnosed within just over 90 days of their previous test. So they are still getting tested every 3 months. Um, but they end up turning, like, let's say I got tested in November, right? November into December, January. Now it's my time to get tested in February. I There's a higher likelihood of folks ringing up positive on that 3 month mark, which is the standard mark that we're telling people to come in and get tested at. So there's something that we're missing in the middle there, more than just talking about prep, more than just talking about getting tested, that isn't quite grabbing the Latino community. And it may come down to branding, it may come down to the way we discuss things, the language we're using. There's a multitude of things that could be affecting this. But yeah, it's a beast of an obstacle to tackle.
Mhm. And we can only get further with more education, more willingness to want that conversation. What are some
Mm-hmm.
of the things that have impacted you as a title holder, and how have you gone through 3 leather contests now? Correct?
Yes, I've done 3. Yes, I'm like, wait,
Yeah,
how
I
many have I
mean,
done? Yeah.
I was like excited to think of every title that you had. So, you've gone through all those experiences. You've been really empowered. I'm sure that has this brought like kind of more confidence to you in terms of how you go about your messaging and how you lead and how you communicate.
Well, it's hard for me to say. I've always been a really big public speaker. My work requires that of me being somebody who goes to conferences and discusses HIV in front of large groups of people, speaks in Spanish in front of large groups of people. So that part I was ready for. The part that I'm not usually ready for is well, I always say the charisma part of it, because talking academically and talking about science is very different than like having a chill conversation with somebody at a bar, which is very much the type of environment that a competition brings. It's how do you create a space where like a bar is both that academic space and that party scene at the same time, and I have a hard time of bridging that gap. So that's the part that I feel leather competitions have helped me with, or at least the leather scene has. But if you ask my friends, they all just think I'm a natural at it. But in my mind, I'm like, no, babe, there's a million scenarios passing through my head all the time.
Yeah. What is something that you've been like, what's an event or anything you've done recently that you were really proud of doing or helped kind of set the vision that you wanted?
Um, ooh, I've done a couple of things that I'm really proud of. Um, Here in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Leather Coalition, which is the organization that owns Mr. Los Angeles Leather, was kind of thrown into a whirlwind when transphobia was discovered amongst like the board. So that's actually why I go by Mr. Cachondo most of the time, is because I try not to link myself too closely with the organization. Um, and because of that, the Latino titles have branched off. So Mr. Cachondo is the one of the now a feeder title, instead of going to Mr. Los Angeles, goes to what is called Mr. Cuero, or leather Spanish. And that has a multitude of other feeder competitions. So I'm helping build that up. Most recently, I helped with doing the Mr. Encuadrado competition and the Mr. Chupada competitions. So we're expanding Latino representation, um, Latino inclusiveness into these leather spaces.
So
One
are
month.
these all excuse me, are these all so these are all leather contests? The
They're
Latino
all
Latino leather contests.
specifically in Los Angeles. Yes. So the idea is that we'll have 5 feeder competitions. We're about to do the last one in March, which will be Mr. Rough Trade LA. Rough Trade does all of my leather. There are leather and gear shop out here. Um, and after that, in Labor Day weekend, I can't remember if it's Labor Day or Memorial Day, whichever one happens in September. That's the
Right?
one.
Labor Day, Labor Day.
Labor Day. So Labor Day is when the big competition will happen. And then next year, that person will go to International Mr. Leather.
Okay,
So
yeah.
they'll be what, class of 48?
Okay, all right, cool. I had to think about numbers and what
Yeah.
we are, what's going on over that. That's really awesome. That's so cool to see the community kind of take this and make their own way in their past and things. Are the Latino contests? I don't want the word. I don't want to. I don't know how to say this. I don't know if progressive is the word I'm looking for, but how are things in terms of gender representation and men, women, non-binary?
Yeah, so I will say right now we are all Mr. titles. That doesn't mean it won't change in the future. but we don't tell anyone that they can't run. The only thing that they have to be okay with is that they would take on a Mr. title. But in terms of who runs, where there is no regulation on like people's bodies, people's appearances, people's identities, they are just currently Mr. titles. So until that changes, the folks that win to be okay with that. And we've had really good turnouts. We've had trans men run, we've had non-binary folks run, Afro Latinos run, Indigenous Latinos run. Um, so far it's looking good, and we are very much branding ourselves as a very inclusive space because of what led to our creation.
That's awesome. Um, you said they're all Mr. titles. What do you think there's any title? What do you foresee to be the next title? Would it be a Ms. title or would it be like a Boo Black title?
Ooh, I have the idea of moving into pub titles. I find pub culture very fascinating. I want to uplift it. I want to give folks the space to uplift their communities. It won't be me leading that charge in any way because I'm not a pup. I'm just pup friendly, I guess. um, but I really want to see pups. Right now, we only have a Miss Pup LA, I think is the title, is Los Angeles Pup. It's either Los Angeles Pup or Pup LA, one of the two. I'm not super familiar with it, but it would be cool to see it expand. And it would be the title I have in mind is called Mr. Cachorro. So Mr. Cachondo is my current title, but Cachorro is another name for puppy in Spanish. So I feel like those two would go hand in hand. Um, that would be exciting.
That's really cool. Why does pub culture fascinate you?
I think it's because I'm so like strict and kind of uptight with my personality. I find people that can just kind of like go into this to their personas and leave their worries and be just so carefree is just so liberating to me, and I just love that. I wish I could do it. I tried it a couple times. I have a puppet, but I could not put myself into the headspace. So I find people that can put themselves into that headspace just amazing, really.
Yeah, I get that. I find it very fascinating. So when is your step down?
Ooh, I just looked this up. It's March 23rd through the 28th is our Leather Pride Week here in Los Angeles. And from that Sunday to Sunday, actually, Sunday to Sunday, it's a full week of competition events. So meet and greets, number draws, and all that.
It's been almost a year. All right. Almost
Yeah,
there. And
almost.
look at everything you've accomplished and how much has happened in that year.
Yeah, I always joke with my friends that I know I'm doing enough when I end up in the hospital because I'm very much known to like run my body through the ground and then get like super sick. So I'm like knocking on wood and keeping my fingers crossed that that's not gonna happen to me anytime soon. But yeah, I've been doing a lot. I keep myself very busy. Um, Only really like December was my month off from having won 2 Augusts ago as Mr. Cachondo. So it's been nonstop, and I don't have any plan on letting up, even once I step down.
I hear I didn't I haven't let up, so I get that. I mean, I totally understand that. But running yourself ragged, now come on, David. Look, let's have the conversation. This probably might be the first time I have this conversation out of any episode. Okay. When
Really?
no, I haven't had a conversation, I think, in terms about what limits are. And because I just had this conversation, or maybe said this at the beginning before we did this about and I still feel that way a little bit that I'm like just hustling for the community all the time. But I was like, man, I gave 95% of my time to the community. And it's not that like I regret it. It's just what the way it played out. I didn't know. It's just
Mhm,
I wish I wish I had have thought about what I wanted to do last year. I didn't
mhm,
think about that. Well, now I'm thinking about the community, obviously, still, and it's picking up, but I am thinking about how I want this to go along with my journey. You know what I'm saying?
mhm. Yeah, I feel that. Yeah,
What
no.
leads someone into how do you know when you've had too much?
How do I know when I've had too
Yeah.
much? Uh, maybe I'm just a little more tired on a Monday than normal. So I might work from home that day instead of going in. Usually if I like ask for a day off, that's how I know I'm more tired than normal because I'm not one to ask for time away. But I will once I, wake up a little more dehydrated than I've been in the past. But yeah, no, I'm
See,
pretty good at knowing my limit, but sometimes, at least one time for sure, I just after IML actually, I ended up in the hospital because I had like my adrenaline was too high, and it when it all came crashing down, I was more dehydrated, ended up in the hospital with like kidney issues, which is very common for folks. If you look at like entertainers who like performance after performance after performance, event after event after event, it's most likely like a kidney issue or a dehydration issue. So I was on it was on brand, but yeah.
But so well, my thing lately has been that I mean I have something going on. Like, do you are you always busy?
Yes.
Okay. And is it always the wheels turning, working on multiple things, trying to make sure this is going, this is going, all that type of stuff?
Usually, yeah. Usually it's Monday through Friday work, an event in the middle of the week, event on the weekend, preparing for a contest, to judge a contest or to produce a contest. So
That's a lot, dude.
yeah, I know it's a lot, yeah. But I have a lot of fun doing it. And then like my partner is on the call right now, and we find time for each other. I'm traveling a lot, so I'll go to a conference every month, every other month, I think is where I'm at right now. So yeah.
So we talked about, I guess, sash fatigue or
Is that
community
what you call it?
fatigue, maybe possibly. I don't know. But let's dig a little deeper. What gets you like what keeps you going? What makes you push yourself to that point to what is behind that? Like what do you feel? Why do you feel you need to do this in that manner, in that way, at that speed?
Oof. Why do I mean, I do it because I love it. First. Second, actually probably just tied with that is my community. It's been really amazing to have folks come up to me and say like, I come to this event because I met you here and I saw your title and I've followed you since that day, and I just keep coming back to these spaces. Um, I've had people who I've never met before, but have just seen my photo like in the leather journal after getting on podium. People who just happened to have somebody that posted a video of the Los Angeles leather competition where I was wearing my chador outfit, and that keeps me going. Is that idea of like somebody out there seeing themselves in me, and that's just more than I could have ever imagined for myself.
It's I'm sure when you travel too, like it's the people knowing who you are, and I mean I think that we've all experienced that to some degree, but you know that part and that has to be really cool. But you're inspiring people, man. You're that's you people are looking at you and they're like, I want to carry myself in that manner, or I want to go further than this person. So that's fantastic. We're at the point where I at the show towards the end where I asked all my I guess guests the same question. I'm always really dramatic about it, but really all it is that is there anything in the community, David, that you think that we are not shedding any light on or enough light? Something that people don't normally talk about in the community.
Ooh, there's a couple of things actually.
Go give me a couple of things. Give me a couple of things.
ooh, okay. So from the get-go of winning Mr. Cachondo, there were a lot of folks that were really excited to see a Latino title step into the ring here in Los Angeles. And this is something that I've noticed across the country as well. But I obviously because I'm here in LA and I've spent more time here, leading up to IML, it was more common to hear it from folks here in LA. But people would come up to me and say like, "Oh my God, like you're amazing. Latino representation is super important." And then they would say something super problematic about Latino culture. I remember one time specifically, I was at an event. It was just after IML, and somebody was like, "I loved everything you did. I love everything you stand for. You would love this people of color Latino night that we do. It's called Club Ghetto." And I was just like, okay, like why would you assume that I would enjoy that? Like based off the title of that, like that is a problematic like name, and they weren't quite understanding it. So I think something that we don't quite talk too much about is like what representation looks like within leather. Who is running the Latino leather nights? Who's running the spaces where these Latino nights are happening? And are these places equipped to address and have conversations that are appropriate for Latinos? We shouldn't be having spaces that are called Club Ghetto and that be the Latino night in our community. Um, we shouldn't be calling it International Mr. Leather if it isn't quite as international as it could be, right? Mr. Colombia was there, but Mr. Brazil, Mr. Mexico, Mr. Peru, Mr. Venezuela, Mr. Argentina, Mr. Panama were not in attendance. A lot of Latin America is left out. Most of Europe is there. That's wonderful, right? Um, Asian representation and even African representation is missing. It's not quite as international as it could be, and it's completely dominated by uh, American titles, which is also something that is leaking into other spaces. I noticed that when I went to Mexico and Peru, even the leather titles down there take a lot from American leather culture, because that has become like the dominant space, and they kind of just follow the rules that we've created, which kind of hinders creativity. And I think that's something that we need to address a little bit more as well. There's a
I
lot more, but those are the big ones.
so with is it what is keeping all of these Latin cultures and Latin leather winners and titles from getting to IML?
Yeah, visa processes, money, um, and essentially representation from outside communities that acknowledge these spaces. I thought it was really important that Marcus, in his step down speech, mentioned that Mexico Leather has had a leather club specifically for 30 years, but they have not had a leather representation at IML in those 30 years, as much as they could have. Argentina just is completing 6 years of having a leather club down there. So it's really the way we choose to acknowledge foreign clubs. We acknowledge European foreign clubs very, very adamantly on social media, from from an IML perspective, right? Folks that have been to IML really uplift those leather clubs, but we don't necessarily always talk about Latino leather clubs. But we're always happy to go to PV or Cancun or Mexico City to party.
Those are great points, and my thing too is that you would think maybe as an international community we would want to try to get our representation there. I mean, if we know and pinpoint that there's certain issues that maybe our national international title holders are having to get to that competition, why aren't we at least trying to build that bridge and help them get there?
Yeah,
And
yeah, I agree.
I mean, there's a lot of things like I have a problem with gender just as well. So I'm one of those people that kind of doesn't like the fact that we gender titles, but I get where we are now, and I understand that we have to build that representation. But there's so much we need to work on just from talking and having this conversation with you. So much visibility is not being there, or not being represented in so many levels, and it just proves how much. Well, one, if you're a man, but if you're a white man, like you're going to get there. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And you realize how much more difficult it is as us as people of color to show up in magazines, leather magazines, and be represented as, sexy and attractive, even if we aren't traditional white burly men, you know what I'm saying? Like that. There's a lot of hurdles. And we reinforce some of these stereotypes sometimes. And we have to, I think, like unwire what we've done and like rewire how we think about things sometimes.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's
Absolutely.
in the community to do it though.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's a lot of work. And yeah, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to discuss. There's a lot to figure out where the first step is. But honestly, I think the best thing we can do right now is uplift these leather clubs. So like I said, Argentina Leather is having its 6 year anniversary like as we speak right now. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge that and we give them their flowers right now that they're doing that.
I'm super glad that you did this interview, and I'm glad that we talked about all this. And honestly, anyone that's going to be watching this, I mean, this is great. I mean, I learned a lot on this too. But like, this is, but let's just get at all these issues that we need to work out in unison in our community to be successful. Uh,
Hmm.
so, David, my IMO brother, All right, we've come to the end of Throwing Light. So, like I said, I'm planning on hopefully putting a little reunion together for us for IML, and then I'm hoping that in some way that we continue to be a part of each other's lives, and at least know that we're there if we need something. So, I
Yeah.
thank you very much, David, for coming and
No,
doing the show. I
thank you
hope
for giving me the space.
I would be at I went to RGV last year, but I got in a car wreck, and so it was all dramatic. But I still got there. But I'm not going this year. I'm gonna
Oh, okay.
great,
Dang.
but it's gonna
Where are
be a
you at?
blast. I had Jesus on. I had Jesus on the show last month.
Yeah, where are you at in Texas?
I'm in
Because you are
Austin.
in Austin. Yeah, you're Mr. Austin.
Yeah, that's what you said. Yeah, you're Mr. Austin.
Yeah, I remember the sash. It took me
Okay, at
a
the end
bit.
now, I've started doing this new thing where I have people repeat the tagline. So when I count to three, you're going to say, "If you're not throwing light, you're not acting right." Okay.
Cool. It's you're not throwing like okay, yeah, got it.
Practice. You want to do it?
You're not throwing like you're not acting right.
If you're not throwing light, you're not acting right.
Cool. That's okay.
Ready?
Yep.
One, two, three.
If you're not throwing light, you're not acting right.
Well, I get so excited when that gets accomplished every episode. Thank you so much. All right,
Cool.
well, yo, that brings us to the end. I think David again. You will be able to follow him for my tags and everything. Everything that he talked about. Let's uplift everybody in this moment. Let's not leave anybody behind. Let's support each other. With that being it, I'm LTJ Reeds. This has been Throwing Light, and if you're not throwing light, you're not acting right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.